Well, hi everyone. Kia ora koutou katoa, malola lei, and a very warm welcome to everybody that's here joining the Business Education SIG, our second seminar for 2025. So thank you very, very much for joining us. We have the wonderful, the amazing Professor Danny Liu from the University of Sydney joining us today. Danny is a international and national Australian award winner for his teaching, and he is the go-to person, and I can say that with quite hand on heart honesty, AI expert and well regarded in this space, both nationally and internationally. Today, he will be taking us through program level assessment design and the two-lane approach. So without further ado, over to you, Danny.
Thanks so much, Audrey. I'm coming to you from the land of the Daramarago. I want to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and also pay respects to the elders of the lands that you're on today as well. So this is a fairly small group today, so I'd like to keep this fairly casual. So if you have questions at any time, I'll keep my Zoom chat thingy open, and also the Zoom window open on the left, so I can keep looking to see if people have any questions coming through. So you've probably heard me bang on in many different areas about the two-lane approach. So I've got some new things to think through, and also some new examples, but some of the slides you may have seen before if you've heard me talk about two-lane before as well. So let me get started with the slide deck, and yeah, like I said before, we can keep this fairly casual and bounce ideas around. Share sound, share. Okay, so we're thinking about this in the context of business education, and let's kind of do a few things at the scene. You may have seen some of these videos before. This is a very short snippet of a video that we made for TEXA towards the end of last year. TEXA came to us and said, you know, we've reviewed our RFIs that the 200 odd providers have sent to us, and we can see some challenges in terms of people's understanding around AI security and those kind of things. And so this very short video is just part of, or short snippet is part of one of the videos that we made for them. And this particular snippet shows people how, you know, ChatGPT can take a spreadsheet like we just saw then, and basically with a bit of extra information, it's able to then analyze what's in the spreadsheet and do a comparison of trends, draw some graphs as will appear on the screen very soon, and basically help the student, do the analysis for the student and then talk the student through the analysis. The student here is being shown to kind of ask the AI to write up a results section, and it's doing so very happily. And then afterwards, we're going to activate a plugin called Scholar AI. And this particular plugin is going to enable ChatGPT to basically access the literature. And then from there, it's able to produce basically, you know, an introduction, sorry, pause, introduction, which has literature inside it. And then we're going to ask the AI to produce a discussion, and it's going to do that very happily too, again, using real literature. So all those kind of AI proofing suggestions of for students who use real literature don't apply anymore and haven't applied for about 18 months. The next thing we're going to see in this video is activation of a plugin called Humanize. And Humanize's role is to basically use AI to mask the AI written text so that it's undetectable by AI-based AI detectors. And so we do that, it rewrites it basically, and then the next bit of the video shows this student being particularly careful and using a prompt which they found off Reddit to basically get AI to rewrite its text again. And then when we feed this kind of AI double rewritten text through to very, very commonly used AI detectors, you can see the kind of the scores that we're getting here. So one is 0% AI and one is 80% human. I can't tell you which these detectors are because I'm going to get sued, but this is the state of detection right now. Okay. This is an interesting video which I found on LinkedIn just a couple of months. So no, actually no, about a month ago. This is OpenAI's AI agent called Operator. And Operator is a new AI agent which OpenAI have put out. And Operator's role is basically to operate a browser for you. Okay, so you open it up, it's available to very rich users of ChatGPT. And basically what you're seeing here, I'll play the video. What you're seeing here is Operator in its own browser. Basically, the AI is looking at the browser and scrolling through the browser and answering questions. Okay, it's noticing that it hasn't finished all the questions, and so it's going back, looking at question 2, answering that, submitting the quiz and getting 100%. Obviously, it's a very basic quiz here. It's only about herbs and those kind of things. But you can imagine as AI gets better and better, this is basically AI mostly autonomously operating a browser and completing a quiz of its own accord. Okay. The next video I wanted to show is this one. You may have also seen this one. This one's also from one of the Texa videos we made. In response to what we've seen, a lot of people will say, okay, well, for these degrees or to assure assessment security, we're going to run online vivas. Okay, we're going to run vivas with a bunch of our students. This particular snippet from this video, there is audio, so I'll let the audio play. But it's basically me as the student talking to one of my colleagues who is pretending to be the examiner. And on my screen, which is what you see in front of you, on my screen is an AI. The left AI in white is doing a transcript of our conversation, and the right AI in blue is using a different AI to basically help me think about, or rather tell me what I should say in response to my examiner. Okay, so I'm going to play this video. It's got sound, and then we'll have a chat about it after it plays. Hi, I'm Danny. Daisies. Let's fast forward to that bit.
Thanks for coming, Danny, for your exam today in a course on rhetoric and communication. The goal today is that we can check in on your knowledge about the course concepts. So could you start by telling me how you would define classical rhetoric?
So rhetoric to me is how we persuade through communication. It involves things like understanding and using different techniques to convey messages that influence an audience. So this includes the use of ethos, pathos, and logos, as well as considering how the audience might respond to this and tailoring the message to them appropriately.
Excellent. And a major challenge we've spoken about in the course is how you adapt communication for multicultural audiences. Have you considered this at all? And do you have any research sources that might support you in this understanding?
Yeah, so it's really important in this kind of context to adapt to multicultural audiences. It involves understanding their cultural differences and how they communicate, maybe their styles, values, and also expectations. I think it's important to be culturally sensitive and aware of these non-verbal cues, which is really important when you do communication. So things like language nuances and context and those kind of things. I've looked into sources like Hofstadter, cultural dimensions theory, and also Hall's work on high context and low context cultures. And these provide valuable insights into these differences. So let's see what Ben thought of this.
Wow, that was really impressive. Yeah, I can't believe it. It's those answers are at a standard that we would get in first year writing, definitely. And then when you brought in the research, I was thinking that's sort of equivalent to second year levels. And I thought I might catch you out by asking about something to do with culture. It might introduce some bias or some mistakes, but it seemed to handle that really well.
So it's interesting to have to think about what things are cheatable essentially by AI these days, or doable by AI, and we would be none the wiser. If you were an examiner, for me, I was reading off the screen, you wouldn't be able to tell. You tell me touch my nose, I touch my nose. I'm not an avatar, and so things that we thought once were not doable are now doable. One of the risks, obviously, for us as business educators is think about what this means for students after they graduate and whether or not they're able to know what they're meant to know and also be able to engage in this world. This was an interesting headline out just a few months after ChatGPT came out. And this was where a bunch of Samsung engineers basically posted company confidential code into ChatGPT, and there was a ban at Samsung on the use of ChatGPT because of this leak. And the news basically said, this was an accidental leak of internal source code. ChatGPT was therefore banned, and there were worries about, where this code would have gone, because once you send the code off to OpenAI, who knows what they do with it, those kind of things. Okay, so this is interesting implications for how we help students understand ideas around data privacy and security and those kind of things when they use AI. Another kind of interesting thing is, well, Samsung banned their employees from using it. I don't know whether or not the ban actually worked or not. Probably not. If we tell students that generative AI is banned, this particular graph, just from a research report from Tyson Partners last year, was saying that basically even if we tell students that Gen AI is banned, at least half of them are still going to use it. Okay, and this was just from about 12 months ago now. I'm sure that has increased since then. Okay, even if we tell students it's banned, they're still going to use it anyway. This is a problem for students that we graduate, okay? Because we can imagine that into the future we might see an headline that looks like this. Okay, markets plunge, CFO admits using AI for MBA coursework, and then maybe the article will read like this. It's a fake article, obviously, but just imagine this article existing in a year or two's time. More than 15,000 investors lost an estimated 3.8 billion. Okay, and the reason is because the CFO of this particular company used Gen AI to complete virtually all their finance and accounting coursework. And when the Eastern Sydney Business School was queried on this, they said that, or the academics said that they clearly instructed students that AI tools should only be used for brainstorming and editing, not for doing anything else. Okay, so this is a fake news article, but you can imagine something like this being splashed across the front pages in a year's time. Okay, when students go through our MBA or Bachelor of Business programs and they basically are not checked to see if they know what they know, because we just go around telling them that they shouldn't use Gen AI without any way of actually knowing this. Okay, so that's a big issue for us. Sydney University, every university, we don't want to be graduating people who are like this. Okay, we need to have assurance that people know what they're meant to know. So the implications for this now for the work that we're doing in universities and also down the track is that we need to be able to confirm the value of our award programs. Okay, we need to make sure that our award programs have value to students, to the community, to us. Value for me in this kind of AI world sits in two places: integrity and also relevance. Integrity in terms of, do we know that the person walking across the graduation stage knows what they're meant to know, okay, and can do what they're meant to do. Relevance is in terms of, do graduates and the community and industry and companies, do they feel that the education that our students have gotten is relevant for this contemporary world? Okay, so we don't want to hold students back from AI because that reduces the relevance of our award programs. But at the same time, we also need to make sure students actually have the knowledge and skills and dispositions, possibly without the help of AI, okay, in order to assure integrity. So we need both sitting side by side simultaneously, and that's not easy. This is an interesting graph recently out from the Digital Education Council, and this is an interesting graph because it's basically saying that people who are more familiar, or educators who are more familiar with AI, they think that AI is less of a threat to their jobs, but they also think that assessment methods need more change, versus the ones on the left, the early adopters or early explorers. So these are the people who know less about AI, and they think that that assessments are okay right now. They don't need as much changing, but they're also more afraid that AI is going to take their jobs. Okay, so the more you know about AI, I think what this graph is trying to say, the more you know about AI, the more that you recognize it's got a transformative impact on how we do our work, but also how we assess and teach our students. Okay? And so part of this is just saying that, well, we need to build this awareness amongst people around us in order to kind of bring them into that area of, oh, we need to actually do something about this now, but it's not going to take our jobs. We just need to adapt. The message coming through from students, from other research, this is some research out from University of Queensland and collaborators, which is quite interesting. They surveyed about 8,000 students last year across Australia, and they came up with a lot of different insights into how students are engaging with AI. One of the questions they asked students is, how are they using AI? And a lot of that you see here is, I use AI to answer my questions. I use AI to create stuff for me or to do work for me. Why are they using it? Because it's easier, okay, and because it's faster. Possibly because it's easier than faster than actually learning itself. Okay, that's problematic in a way. When students were asked about whether they get enough guidance, this is problematic as well. Only 1/3 say that their university helps them to understand how it can be useful for their studies, And less than a quarter are saying that my universities are preparing me to use AI into the future. Okay, so this is really damaging, I guess, for that relevance piece for value, because it means that we're not actually helping our students think about what this contemporary future looks like when AI is kind of everywhere. So a few things that we need to kind of do as a sector. One thing is we need to start kind of moving beyond the idea that AI is just something that produces stuff for us. Okay, you saw in the student survey before that, you know, most of the uses by students were, it drafts a document for me, it makes an email for me, it summarizes a note for me, all those kinds of things. It's seeing AI as a peon, seeing AI as a worker bee whose only role is to do the boring stuff we don't want to do. Okay. The better way to see AI is to kind of see AI as a partner, not just the worker bee that does the boring stuff, but actually a collaborative voice or perspective that sits alongside you, and you can ask it questions as well as kind of get input and output from it. Now, when you start seeing AI as a partner, you start to see the more powerful applications of AI rather than just it does the boring stuff for me. Okay. If you start seeing AI as a partner, it also opens up new opportunities for you, because if we and our students see AI as a peon, okay, it's a threat to us because AI is there to do their homework, okay, to do their assignments. That's a threat. But if we see AI as a partner in their learning, we can start to think about, well, what else is now? What can actually happen now in the classroom and assessments, because it's there to partner with students as a kind of ubiquitously available force. And this also allows us to kind of change our mentality as educators from one of policing AI, kind of banning it, restricting it, controlling it, to one of seeing how we can actually think about new possibilities that AI opens up now that it's available to us. Okay, so thinking about that kind of shift in mindset, I think, is really important. So one possible way forward is the two-lane approach that we've been banging on about for the past kind of almost 2 years now. So apologies if you heard this before, but the two-lane approach kind of tries to simultaneously address those two aspects of value, integrity value as well as relevance value. Lane 2 assessments are assessments which we openly accept that AI is going to be used. And our role as educators is basically to say, okay, we're going to help you understand how to use AI better, primarily for the purpose of actually developing your disciplinary knowledge, skills, and dispositions. Okay, so lane 2 is not about learning AI. It is about learning your discipline, but with AI's help. Okay, in a good way that where AI won't actually replace or do your learning for you. Okay, and again, how we do that, I'll go through a few slides soon. So that lane 2 is trying to hit that relevance angle of value to make sure that we do help our students and train them on how to use AI well. Lane 1 is thinking about how we can secure learning. Okay, so how we can assure that students have actually developed those disciplinary knowledge, skills, and dispositions. So lane 1 has to be in person. Okay, it has to be supervised in some form or another. It does not just mean exams. Okay, I don't understand a lot of people when they hear me say lane 1, they hear exams. It's not just exams. The fewer exams we have, the better. Okay, there are lots of other ways to do lane 1 assessments that don't involve sit-down tests and exams. Okay, but they have to be in person. They have to be supervised in some form or another. It could be a kind of a bedside consultation. That's a lane 1. It could be an interactive oral. That's a lane 1. A lot of authentic examples of lane 1 assessments are possible. The point of lane 1 is to assure the integrity value of our award programs. Okay, it's to say that this student is a student in front of me, and they're able to, or they're demonstrating their disciplinary knowledge, skills, and dispositions because I know it's them. Lane 1 may involve AI. Okay, marketing, for example, these days, you're going to be hard pressed to find a marketing firm which will employ a graduate who doesn't know how to use AI. Okay, they want their marketing graduates coming into the firm to know how to use AI because it enhances their work so much. So you can imagine that a marketing lane 1 assessment might be an interactive oral where the student sits with their examiner in front of a computer which has AI running, and then the examiner runs them through a scenario, and the student has to use the AI to demonstrate that they've achieved learning outcomes of being able to, for example, make a compelling marketing case or marketing piece. Okay. So lane 1 doesn't mean no AI, it means controlled. Okay, supervised, you know it's a student, you know it's them achieving their learning outcomes. Lane 1, obviously, a very expensive and time-consuming to run, and so usually we're saying Lane 1, try this at the program level, whereas Lane 2, these can be unit level assessments. The whole point, I guess, of us having assessments is really so that we can develop contemporary capabilities in our students. If I took a step sideways and kind of asked you this question, which app would you use to create a balance sheet for an annual report? Okay, obviously the answer is Excel. Okay, when we go around and talk to our students about balance sheets, do we go around saying orange light to Word, but green light to Excel, and red light to OneNote PowerPoint? We don't do that. We can't do that because students have ready access to all of these applications. Okay, so we don't go around restricting or banning or controlling the use of these softwares. Instead, what we do is we show them why Excel is the best way, and we show them how to use Excel well in order to create this balance sheet. We don't go around banning, we go around educating, okay? Because that's our role as educators, we're not police. So the banning and restriction angle is one of the issues I have with assessment scales and also traffic lights. Okay, so as in the AI assessment scale or AI assessment traffic lights might look something like this. You have different levels. You can only level 2 use AI for editing. Okay, you can only level 3 use AI to draft stuff or evaluate. Okay, or number 4, you can use AI for anything. The problem with a traffic light system or an assessment scale system, there are many. One of them is, how do you know? Just because you've told that MBA student to only use AI for editing, how do you know? You can't. Okay? Unless you have them in a supervised environment, you can't. And so if you're relying on all their submitted assignments to tell you whether they have picked up the disciplinary skills, knowledge, and dispositions, then we're kidding ourselves here. Okay, so we can't know, we can't restrict with these. And so that's why it's not very useful to have these kind of pretend rules. The idea of pretend rules comes from Phil Dawson from Deakin, and he also, is one of his many things that he says is, any restrictions that cannot be enforced will harm the validity of the assessment. We are no longer measuring what we think we are measuring if we have rules that we cannot enforce. And assessment scales and traffic lights are rules you cannot enforce. Okay, because just because, again, you say to students only use AI for editing, we can't enforce that. The third issue I have with these things is that the lights and scales and numbers and those kind of things, they imply there's a linear gradation of AI use, but there really isn't. Okay, it's not that you can just dial to number 2 and say, oh, I'm just going to use AI for editing here, because the reality of AI being everywhere in so many different tools and being usable in so many different ways is that the reality of AI use is very, very diverse. Okay. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of scale that we can look at. The reality of AI use is more like a menu. All right, the menu. When you go to a restaurant, you're shown a menu. You don't usually eat everything from the menu, and you don't necessarily start from the left and move to the right. Okay. And when you sit down at a restaurant and you look from the menu, you might pick different things depending on how you're feeling on a particular day. All right. The menu analogy emphasizes that there are lots of different ways to use AI productively in an assessment, which don't fall into a neat scale. For assessment 1, you might say to students, these are the healthiest choices from the menu to choose from. Okay. And for assessment 2, these are the healthiest choices. It's not a scale, it's not a linear scale, it's a choice of purposes. If students choose to eat everything from this menu, then, well, like if you go to a restaurant and you eat everything from the menu, you're going to get horribly sick. If students eat everything from the AI assessment menu, they're going to get sick and they're not going to learn much at all. Okay, which means that when they come to a lane 1 assessment down the track, they're going to be caught out and they're going to be seeing you again next semester. Okay, so the menu approach we prefer because it kind of emphasizes that there is a lot of choice, and it actually gives educators a lot of agency in thinking about, well, okay, I know AI is there. How do I, using my pedagogical mindsets, how do I show my students the best ways to use AI to help them learn? How do I help them pick the best items from this menu which are healthiest for their learning? So I'll give you some examples of what this lane 1, lane 2 menu stuff looks like in practice. Okay. This is a real example from one of the courses that I teach into. And it's the grad cert in educational studies at Sydney University. We have an extremely simple course. It's only got 4 units and they're all core. These are the 4 units. What we did last year is we turned almost every single assessment into a lane 2 assessment, okay, which means that we showed our students the menu and we said to them, we know you can use AI for all these things, okay, and we know that we won't be able to tell if you used AI for any of these things. What we're going to do instead is looking at this menu for every single assessment, we're going to point out the healthiest choices from this menu, okay, for each assignment separately. And then we're going to help you learn how to use some of these AIs so that it actually improves your learning as opposed to circumvents your learning. We also introduced or changed 2 out of all the assessments into lane 1 assessments. These were hurdle task interactive orals where we sat down the student in front of us for 15, 20 minutes and we had a conversation with them. We had a conversation with them under a particular scenario which mapped to the program learning outcomes, and we also had a rubric to support us too. And through these lane 1 assessments, we were able to, in that 15, 20-minute conversation, you'd be surprised how much information you get about students' capabilities in that conversation. We were able to basically assure or not assure that students had achieved or not achieved the learning outcomes for the entire program. Okay? I was the co-coordinator for EDPR 5001 on the left, okay, and all of our assessments were lane 2. So it did make me very uncomfortable that I could be saying goodbye to a student in EDPR 5001 who had used AI entirely for everything and not learned a thing. But I had to rely on my colleagues running EDPR 5002 that they would catch that student out when they run their lane 1 assessment number 3. Okay. So the point of, I guess, this structure is to say that you don't need these expensive, time-consuming lane 1 assessments everywhere. It's also to say that lane 1 assessments don't have to be exams. It's also to say that we need to start thinking about at the program level, the beyond unit level, how we design our assessments, okay? Because we don't necessarily need or want or can afford to have lane 1s everywhere. And it's a mindset shift, though, for us to be comfortable with that idea. I'll give you 2 more examples of 2-lane at a program level.
Sorry, Danny, you mentioned we could just jump in with questions.
Yeah, of course,
something was a tip of my mind. I was thinking about that. So if just a scenario in terms of how you might manage the overall grade weighting across the program there, and I guess the question's an obvious one. If you get to the lane 1 interactive oral assessment, it's very clear that the student essentially knows nothing without AI support.
Yep.
How would that be retrospectively applied somehow in terms of weighting across all the course assessments that make up the program? How do you manage that in practice? It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And for us, our policy doesn't allow us to apply grades across units. So we can't, for example, say just because you failed your orange assessment in 5002, you therefore fail your assessments 001. We had to let them pass 5001, but because the orange assessment 002 was a hurdle task, they couldn't pass 5002. It was worth 35%, I think, but a hurdle, so it was a must pass. So even if they got 65% through AI and they failed that 35%, they still failed the whole unit.
Got you. Yep.
And then because these are all core units in the program, they wouldn't be able to complete the program unless they pass those 2 orange assessments.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So they could still pass the 1st and the 3rd units, but they couldn't actually graduate from the program because they hadn't achieved program learning outcomes measured through those 2 orange assessments.
Great, thanks. That makes sense. Thank you.
No worries. So ours is a very simple program. We only have, up to 100 students every year, a very small and also very well-defined program. In something more complex like, science and arts and those kind of things, it gets a bit more complex and we can't have as neat an approach. So this is an example from first year chemistry. In first year chemistry, what happens is that you have 4 units, which are kind of the usual ones students take in a particular first year, and then they have about 75% of their score, which comes from theory. Some of this could be lab reports, some of this could be other kinds of take-home assessments. It might involve an exam as well. But what they share in common between those two units on the left is that they share a laboratory component. And in the laboratory, this might be where you have a lane 1 assessment. So you will then you will observe students in the laboratory. You might give them a little Q&A in the laboratory. And as part of that, you basically assure that they have attained the knowledge and the skills needed to finish first year chemistry. Okay. And again, in the second semester, you might have a similar thing as well. Okay. So you think about where you can place the assurance, and in this place, the assurance is something which the marks can apply into both kind of units. Okay, so different models of this kind of thinking beyond the unit. So this isn't quite program level thinking, but it is kind of outside of unit thinking. And in very comprehensive universities, this might be the only place we can go. It may be impossible for comprehensive universities to actually achieve true program level assessment because the awards that we offer are so complex. You know, at Sydney University, I think the last count was about 35,000 of our students do a completely unique set of units. My goodness, you know, how do we achieve any sort of program level thing there? We probably can't go fully program, but you know, to balance flexibility for students with assurance of learning at program level, we need to think of other ways to do it. Okay, this is another example. And this is not a real example, but one that we're thinking through hard with our coordinators. They're thinking about, you know, in a major, you might take, you know, particular cores in first and second year, and then you might take electives as part of your third year. You could have lane 2 assessments dotted throughout these things. Okay, the lane 2 assessments, you know, they count for marks. They're there to kind of support student learning and encourage student learning and allow them to get feedback and everything. But then at particular places, maybe at the final end of the year or in the middle or something, a key places of the journey, you might have some lane 1 assessments. Okay, and maybe at third year you might have a common lane 1 assessment just to kind of finish them off from the program. This might look like a 30-minute interactive oral. It might look like a skills demonstration in a clinic. It might look like a sit-down exam, possibly, maybe hopefully not. It might look like something else, okay? But the idea here is that there are many different creative ways that we need to think through beyond the unit design, because not all of us will be able to, and many of us won't be able to, achieve true program level redesign. Okay, there are some universities going at it really hard, and you know, love that they're doing that. I just don't see that's possible at Sydney, and that's why we've had to come up with these kind of alternate approaches to try. Now, the things that have kind of gone alongside this at the University of Sydney, I'll show you on this slide, is that, well, first of all, we've had to think about how we change our policies and systems. Okay, so think about how we can embed new definitions of assessments, and I'll show you what these definitions are soon, into our policy, and also reorient things like academic integrity policies, assessment policies, and those kind of things. Okay, and also update our curriculum management system to match the new settings. The other thing that needs to happen is that we need to, once some of these things are done, we need to start thinking about how we can take the existing categorization and typology of assessments and move it into the new one. So we have currently, you know, assessments which are called things like take home. You know, we have assessment called assignment. You know, what on earth does that mean? The new assessment categories and types are much more descriptive, and I'll show you what they're like soon. And what we need to do is we need to move people and assessments into those kind of new descriptors. One of the reasons to move it into new descriptors is because our new descriptors have explicitly lane 1 or lane 2 next to them. And so when people choose one of the new descriptors, we'll be able to actually say, oh, okay, in this program, it looks like you don't really have verification of learning outcomes 2 and 3, okay? Because you've remapped all of these onto open assessments, lane 2 assessments, but none of those are secured, all right? At some point in time, some of it's already happened in some faculties, and some faculties need to still do it. Program teams need to take a step back and actually look at their program learning outcomes. Okay, so what is it that we want a graduate to know and do and think after they leave us? Right. Most PLOs probably could stay, but there are probably some PLOs which maybe need a bit of revision. Then they need to map these to the ULOs, which are the unit learning outcomes, and then the unit teams come in and then map these ULOs to assessments. And then through this map, hopefully we'll be able to see that, you know, which PLOs are assured through lane 1 assessments and which are not. And if they're not, or if there needs to be more work done, then obviously assessment redesign will be needed as well. Now, this is not necessarily linear. Different people, different faculties, individuals, schools, they're at all different stages of this, okay? The policies do need to probably come first because they need to enable the rest of it, but the rest of the remapping and redesign, those kind of things, that's a really live conversation that everyone is at a different stage with. And so it just needs to happen, but needs to start from different places. I mentioned before that we're introducing new assessment categories and types. So in order to kind of help us see what is secured and what is not secured currently. And so on the screen is a list of our new assessment types, which have been put into policy and approved by committees. And this is a selection, or these are all the currently selectable secured assessments. And you can see that obviously tests and exams are there because we have to have them. But there's also a lot of other things like interactive orals or demonstrations or creative tasks or Q&As or supervisions or observations that can also form part of secure assessment. Okay, so by laying it out like this, what we're trying to encourage people to do is think beyond the exam. To say to them, there are really valid, secure assessment modalities that can happen, that can help you assure your program learning outcomes, but they don't have to be an exam or a test. Okay. And for lane 2, we've got a range of different things as well. Okay, for these lane 2 assessment types, we've got a range of types which will hopefully map to a lot of existing assessments. The way that we approached this was that we actually try to align this to evidence-based assessment and learning approaches. So you might recognize in the left-hand column, practice, inquiry, production, creation, discussion. Those are from Laureade's activity types. Okay, so Dinah Laureade, about 13, 14, 15 years ago now, came up with a very widely used book, which is around teaching as a design science. And it's basically, you know, laying out a bunch of learning activity types that would encourage different forms of learning. And so what we're trying to do here is we're saying, okay, we're going to align the assessment categories to pedagogically rich forms of learning. And then we're going to define assessment types within those categories, which kind of give them a bit of life, okay? And so through this, what we're trying to encourage students and also educators to think about is no longer thinking about assessment as a product. You know, it's not assignment, or it's not take home, or it's not kind of whatever anymore. It's thinking about how can we use assessment for learning. Because if we say, for example, that say a coordinator used to have an assignment where they would get students to analyze a case, okay? And they had to write a 3,000-word essay on that. You know, it might have been called essay before, right? But then what does that tell you about what learning goes on? Nothing. But now they would be having to put their assessment into perhaps the inquiry or investigation category within the case study type. And now this automatically tells us and tells our students that, okay, the thing that you're doing to learn here is investigation and inquiry, and this is through a case study. Right? So it is open because you can use AI to support you in doing this. But really what we're trying to do here is we're encouraging assessment for learning here, as opposed to the assessment of learning, because the assessment of learning comes through lane 1, whereas assessment for learning comes through lane 2. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking, and not all of it is settled and set in stone, but it's the direction of travel that we're heading in at Sydney. Some of the big questions that I think is important for all of us to think through. One of them is, how far ahead are we looking? Okay, which horizon are we preparing for? Everything you see in the middle of that screen here, and I forgot to update this because GPT 4.5 is out now, have happened in the last 2-ish years. Okay, an amazing amount of progress has happened in terms of AI model capability in the last 2 years. It takes us 2 years to update a learning outcome in our learning in our curriculum management systems. You know, go through committees. AI moves at a much faster rate. So we can't just aim for the near-term horizon when we start thinking about how to prepare for the realities of AI, because who knows how long these pink things will take to happen. You know, depending on who you talk to, this thing called artificial general intelligence, which is AI that can basically do everything a human can do, okay, that might be only a few years away. You know, it takes us that long to change a learning outcome, and assessments and those kind of things in our curricula. And so we need to kind of think far enough ahead that we can start thinking now about, you know, well, what does this mean for us, for education, for teaching, for learning, for assessment, if there are going to be AIs which are as smart and as capable as humans. Okay? We need to start thinking about this now. And to help us think about this, well, something that's holding us back really is hoarding. I'm a hoarder. The reason I blew my background is because there's this disgusting back there. But you know, we are educational hoarders, many of us. We will put something into slide 78 of a 1-hour lecture because that could be important for students. And then we'll put 3 other things into slide 82 because that could be really important for students. So we could use that. You know, they could use that next year. Marie Kondo is the famous kind of anti-hoarding person, the person who uses the question, you know, what sparks joy, in order to help people sort through the hoarding in their lives. For us as educational hoarders, many of us, some people are quite good at, I'm not, I'm a hoarder myself in education terms as well. These 2 quotes from Marie, I think really speak to me personally, and hopefully speak to you too, that if we think about the reasons why we can't let something go, it's because we're either attached to the past or we fear the future. Okay, that resonates with me because it's kind of how we react to AI as well. We don't quite know what the future holds, and so we fear it, or we're really attached to how we already do things or how we've always done things, so we don't want to let things go. And this second quote from her is quite powerful too, is that to truly cherish the things that are important to us, we need to first discard those that have outlived their purpose. Now, I do not mean throw away the essay. Okay, we cannot throw away the essay. The essay is really important because it helps students develop foundational skills in deep, critical, long-form thinking, okay? But the essay is no longer useful as a lane 1 secured assessment, okay? So we need to think of other ways we can secure the learning outcomes that essays that essays develop in our students, but we still should keep essays as lane 2 assessments because they still serve a purpose there. Okay, but there are probably other assessments, other ways of doing things, which have outlived their purpose, and we need to discover that together. I think that's all I had, actually. Spoke a bit longer than I thought I would. Happy to have a random chat about things now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danny. That was amazing. And I love the Marie Kondo, you know, touch at the end. You totally had me hooked on that. And I love the quotes. I'm just opening it up to everyone. If you want to either put it in the chat or whether you want to just unmute and ask any questions, please feel free to do so now.
I think Jess had a hand up.
Oh, I was clapping. But look,
Sorry.
since Guy threw me under the bus,
Sorry.
I'd like to ask a question. No, that's okay. Danny, what do you say to colleagues who are reluctant to embrace AI? You know, we here are the choir. We already understand what we have to do, and why we need to do it. But, you know, we've got professors in my department that probably don't even believe that AI exists.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
There's a widely known change management framework called ADKAR, ADKAR. You've probably heard of it, being business people. Rowena Harper from ECU got me onto this. The first couple of steps in ADKAR is awareness and desire. And awareness, I think, is one of those things that, to answer your question, Jess, we need to help people discover if they're reluctant. Awareness comes from a range of different sources. It might come from the voice of their students. Okay, all their students saying, we need to know about this, otherwise we're going to be unemployable. It might come from industry, saying things like, you know, your students are unemployable because you haven't taught them how to use AI. It might come from their own awareness of the capabilities of AI. So I've been told that there's a video that I made with me talking German through the power of AI. That's been a very convincing thing for some academics to kind of see me talk. I can't speak German, obviously, but it's an AI avatar of me speaking German. And so showing academics things that they thought weren't possible, or giving them motivation to actually do things because they care about their students' learning, I think they're powerful things to do.
Nice, thank you.
I've got, oh, sorry, Sandra. Yeah, I was about, yeah.
Hey, Dan. Great talk as usual. Thank you. Where are your students learning to use AI ethically?
Yeah. This is something that we are not all across yet, and we need, as with all across the sector, we need to do a lot more work on. I think the right place for them to learn how to use it ethically is within their courses and their programs, which obviously then means that the academics themselves need to develop the capability to do that and understand that as well. And the reason I say that is because I don't think AI is a kind of a compulsory module that a student can just do and get done with, like other modules that we put on them. But it's so deeply intertwined with disciplinary norms and contexts that we really need to have that ethical discussion in the context of a discipline. An ethical use of AI in music and art might look different to an ethical use of AI in engineering, because of the different privacy, copyright implications, and those kind of and data security implications.
Do you think there is a place for some form of introductory Gen AI course?
I don't see why not. I think to kind of bring everyone up to the same foundational standard, I think that is useful, and maybe the nuance then comes within the courses. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll open it up to Guy.
Thanks. I'll be quick. I realize there's other people too. I run a fully online asynchronous program, and I'm involved in converting another in-person program to asynchronous as well. Any thoughts on lane one in that kind of setting? It's a tough one, I know. Any suggestions you've got?
So I think it comes down to degrees of risk that you're willing to accept, and that the community is willing to accept. No, on the kind of the spectrum of assessments, there is no assessment which is 100% secure. Okay, and in-class tests or examination invigilated by professionals sat in an exam hall, that is near the top. Okay, but again, students could cheat that by using AI devices, earpieces, those kinds of things. An online invigilated quiz, I'd say, is not near the top. I'd say it's kind of near here. Okay, an online Viva, like we saw just then with my rhetoric example, that's probably here. Okay, and face-to-face Viva is probably here. And so the question for us is that for the online programs, where do we want to cut that threshold? Where do we accept that level of risk for our particular program? Personally, for me, I would say nothing. I would say you need to go in person. Okay, and in person is the kind of the basal level we should start at. And anything online is too risky for me personally. But I take it that it's different for different contexts. And the main thing around that, I guess, is that if you're comfortable accepting a lower threshold of risk, then we need to put in place things that will help us Swiss cheese the security. And so you might put in, online Vivas at particular points in the program, mixed in with, recorded demonstrations, mixed in with something else, so you need to kind of use it.
Yeah, that's very pragmatic. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Danny?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? I'm in two different devices at the moment. My mic is not working properly. Now, I want to thanks Danny. It was very informative. And to add to Sandra's comment, what I really struggle is where do we strike a balance in bringing in content and teaching students how to use AI ethically? And do you think every first year course should handle this kind of situation? Is that the way to go? Because I don't teach any first year units. I'm doing third year and finally a master's, but still I'm teaching them some kind of AI as much as possible as to how to use it. But I feel like I'm doing it all alone on my own little world. So that is, I really struggle coming to terms with how to go about it.
So it's a good question. Your question raises a mindset that we have in higher education, which is a unit-based mindset. We're not very good at thinking and talking to people, colleagues beyond our units, and thinking not even at the program level, but maybe at the major level or even the year level. But the better that we can get at talking to our colleagues about what is happening in a program outside of our own kind of siloed units, the better those things will be, because you can say to them, I'm seeing these things in third year. How can we introduce things in first year, which will actually help us to develop these foundational capabilities earlier on, so they don't have these problems that we're seeing in third year? So more conversations, I think, between colleagues that teach between units, I think, is really important. And you're absolutely right. I think the education needs to start in first year about these.
Thank you.
So I think, central learning and teaching officers, they should just give coffee vouchers to colleagues, and they can just go have a coffee for an hour and chat with people about, what's happening in first year, what's happening in your unit.
Yeah, absolutely. My idea is to create some kind of a database where every unit in that program can update what is happening in the particular unit. So when the students come to a third year course that I'm teaching, I know exactly what they have done previously, because we don't have a programmatic pathway that you showed us. So I don't have that. So when students come to my class, I have no idea what they have done. And doing a capstone unit in that setting is really hard because I have to assume what they have done. But I do go and talk to colleagues who have done second year, first year units. But it will be really good if we have a holistic approach to see where they're coming from, because it's a massive setup that we have at Monash. So it's a lot to process.
Yeah, and it's fantastic you're having those conversations. I think side by side, you need the conversations to happen, but you also need the systems to be able to capture this. And we don't have either of those.
It's not only about AI that I worry about. I just think that we need to bring in mechanisms that students can use to identify fake news and stuff like that. A whole thing I have in process that this needs to be done at a first year level.
Yeah, and really AI is just another digital literacy. And literacy is the graduate outcome of many of our universities.
Sure. Let's keep thinking.
Thank you so much, everyone. And wow, we got right through an hour. I think we could still have gone for another half an hour. Thank you so much, Danny. For those of you who are interested, I've put into the chat about the Contextualizing Horizon and put in the link for Friday, because today's session actually clashed with that. I've also just put in there my email address. So if you'd like to join the Business Education SIG, it's free. So then you can find out when these webinars are on. And again, a big thank you to Danny for taking the time and doing that today. Learned so many new things. So thank you very much. I had not heard of ADCAR, so would love to hear a bit more about that. If you can stay on, Danny, that would be fantastic. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.